Ocala.
25 minutes before 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this morning. Yesterday, in our sister city, Gainesville, I must say I'm very proud of the students up there. And I know it was mostly students, wasn't all students. I know everybody says, well, that guy had a right to give his speech, I guess. But you know, the students made a really, really great point of giving him a message, which was, you know, we don't necessarily like what you're going to say, so please get out of here, you know?
Yes.
You know, the school had an obligation, they say, to invite that guy. But we've been fighting this fight for a long time, and how timely is this? We've got a book right now. This is such a well-done book. It's called The Good Fight. It is huge, and it's got some amazing photography in it. It's called The Good Fight, America's Ongoing Struggle for Justice. And on the phone is Rick Smolan. He's the creator of the Day in the Life series. He's a former Time, Life, National Geographic photographer. He has work featured on the covers of Time, Newsweek, Fortune. How exciting would that be? Like, I wonder what the first time was like. Like the first time you saw your own photograph on Time magazine or something. Rick Smolan, good morning, sir. Thank you for being on the air with us today.
Hi, Larry. Hi, Robin. Really nice to be here.
Thank you for being on the air. You know which one picture? I'm just going to start with one.
Yeah, please.
Let me tell you something first. In our community, there's a statue of Chief Osceola. He was one of the, if you don't know the history here, he was one of the Indians that was kicked out and told to please go to Oklahoma. You know, you guys, you know, we're going to live here now. Could you please just leave and go to Oklahoma? And basically that's what happened to him. So when I saw the statue, which had that, I mean, I just paraphrased it in a horrible way, but when I first saw his statue and I read that little piece under it, I said, oh my gosh, we were so nasty to people. And I'm not doing white guilt. Don't call me and tell me I'm doing that. I'm just telling you the truth. We should feel a little bit bad about it. So the one picture in this book is the syphilis, the African Americans that were being tested with syphilis. That's horrible.
Yeah.
How did we do this?
Yeah.
How did we ever think this was ethical?
Well, you know, I think every country has its dark past, and I don't think America's any different. I think one of the things that I think we're all really proud of is if you look back to, if you ask somebody who's Native American or black or Jewish or Muslim or a woman or disabled or gay, would you rather be in 1917 or 2017? I think the answer is pretty clear that things are a hell of a lot better today than they were 100 years ago.
Yeah.
But that's not by any means saying that we've solved all or even the majority of the problems. But it seems like, at least until the last year, the headwinds have been behind us. It seems like we've been moving in the right direction in terms of trying to minimize the damage to minorities, to include people of different faiths and backgrounds and genders. And I think that what's happening right now in America, I think a lot of us are thinking, you know, all this progress, look how fragile it may be if we're not really vigilant. That's my own personal opinion.
And I hope that's not the case. I mean, I just really hope it's not. I think the Founding Fathers may have had their faults. I mean, we all know that they owned slaves, I guess, for the most part. But the words that they left us, that all men are created equal, and we take that word men to mean mankind. That right there, just that one statement, should be our mantra, you know. And like you said, and like the book shows us, we haven't always lived as if that was our belief.
You know, we haven't, and I think, you know, again, just for your listeners to understand what we're talking about here, this is a big coffee table book. It's looking at America over the last 100 years through the eyes of some of the world's most extraordinary photographers, some of the greats, and it also has some really poignant first-person, intimate essays written by people like George Takei from Star Trek. I had no idea he had grown up as a 5-year-old in a Japanese concentration camp. You know, I'm a big Star Trek fan. I had no idea that he told this. And what's amazing is he tells the story about how his family, for no fault other than the fact that they were of Japanese heritage,
Right.
were taken away from their farms, stuck in a concentration camp
Right.
for 2 years. And his family, he said, was so patriotic, even when they came out of the camps, even though their farm had been taken away and they lost all their possessions. These people, so many Japanese Americans actually fought in World War II. And you see this over and over again.
Right.
It's just amazing. People that were terribly mistreated, who are in some ways more patriotic than some of the people that claim to be patriotic.
Yeah, absolutely. The guy who played LeBeau in Hogan's Heroes, I don't know if you're old enough to remember that
Robert
guy.
Cleary.
Thank you. Gosh, listen to you. But I think he was in a concentration camp in Germany, wasn't he? Or somewhere. He's a Jewish guy.
Yeah.
And so when he played the role in Hogan's Heroes, kind of making fun of it all, he had a little backlash from his family, but he has got his own story. I don't know if he's still alive, but I remember hearing that. Tell me about the. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Good. No, ask your question.
Tell me about the beginnings of the book. How did you were you sitting around with your co-author Jennifer Irwit and saying, you know what we should do? We should put this in a big book.
Actually, Jennifer and I were sitting with a really fascinating gentleman named Jonathan Greenblatt, who had just become the head of the Anti-Defamation League. We were sitting at the TED conference.
Yes.
I've been really lucky to be invited to attend and to speak at the conference a few times, and they have dinners every night. So I was talking to this guy sitting next to me, and he was telling me how he'd just become the head of the Anti-Defamation League, and he said, has anybody ever done a book looking at all the different struggles that so many different people, women and the gay community and Muslims and Jews and African Americans, Latino Americans, the disabled, in one book that sort of the point of the book wasn't to depress people. It's actually to say, look how much extraordinary progress we made as a nation.
That's important.
And to look at the, people hear about what we're talking about, and it sounds like, oh my God.
I know.
Pictures.
But I know, but in the course of an interview, I was hoping to make that clear. But yeah, I felt we kind of had to start with that. But I think the title "Good Fight" does say it. But you're absolutely right. That is the important thing for the listeners. I always like to be fair to the book. The book is truly about the fact that maybe we've taken one step back every time we took two steps forward, but we're taking more steps forward than we are back.
Forward.
And I think
exactly.
that's what the book shows us.
So, one of the things in the book, and I'm really curious to hear, you guys have looked through it, and I'm so close to it because I've been living and breathing this the last 2 years, but there's two pictures in the book to me that really kind of sum up what I think the power of this, of the Good Fight book. And the first one is a really chilling photograph of a woman probably in her 70s or 80s who's a elderly grandmother who's a member of the Ku Klux Klan. So she's sitting there in her white robe, and she's kissing her what looks like 6-month-old daughter. And it's just a chilling photograph because you can just feel the hatred being passed on to this innocent little child. No one's born hating anybody else. When you see kids playing together, they don't care if the other kids look different. They don't care if the other kids are disabled. They just want to play. And as they get older, these prejudices take over. And so there's that one picture, which is very chilling. And then the corollary to that is there's a picture taken at Chicago Airport of a Jewish American father with his 7-year-old son on his shoulders, and right next to him is a Muslim American father with his 7-year-old daughter, and they're protesting Trump's ban against anybody coming in from the Muslim world. And the fact that you've got Jews and Muslims together fighting against an injustice, I think, is really extraordinary. And the picture captures that so well.
When these photographs were taken, are they able to be used without the consent of the people that you take their photograph?
Oh, it's a great question. So if you're in public and there's a news photographer there, or there's any photographer there, as long as what it says under the picture is accurate, you don't have the right to say, I don't want my picture used. You're out there in public. Nobody can come into your house and take pictures of you. And, we've been very respectful in terms of treating everybody, both the photographers and the subjects, to make sure that everything in those photographs is absolutely accurate. And that's the job of the media, is to say this is what was actually going on. And I think the people in these photographs were very happy to be photographed. Both the Ku Klux Klan grandmother and the people at the airport. They're out there marching in public, and they're stating what they believe in. And our job as journalists is to say, this is what these people believe in. How do you feel about it, reader, as you see these pictures? Do you agree with what they believe in, or do you object to it?
Ah, okay, yeah.
Were the essayists on board with this at first, or were they a little apprehensive when they were asked?
No, it was 100%. Every single person we approached said they were honored and delighted. And, what I loved is these essays are short. They're very personal. It's almost like you sat down across a dinner table with George Takei, right? Or with Cleve Jones, who started the AIDS Quilt, or Brian Stevenson, who started the Equal Justice Initiative. We wanted to make sure that we had voices representing in some way each of the groups, so that you could feel, again, like you as an individual were hearing from another individual about the personal experiences they'd been through, both good and bad. And a lot of the experiences turned out to be, it's a struggle, but the whole point of the good fight is that, as Larry was just saying, you get, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but in general, you're moving in the right direction.
The book is called The Good Fight, America's Ongoing Struggle for Justice. One of the things I think that it brings to mind, because of the fact that you show older struggles and current day struggles, it makes you realize that, like in today's world, when you hear about the fact that women once didn't have the right to vote, and you think, oh my gosh, how absurd is that? Or you think that once upon a time here in this very town, black people couldn't drink out of the same water fountain as white people. And you think, oh my gosh, how crazy was that? And so some of the things that are happening right now, one day the hope is, and this is the result of the good fight, as you say, we will, or the children of us perhaps, will look back and say, oh my gosh, how crazy was that we didn't allow such and such. We discriminated against people who wanted to love somebody because they loved somebody without any strings attached. So I think maybe that's what the book does for me, because of the fact that you're not focusing on one fight, but many fights, old and new.
I was really excited that we were able to kind of delay the presses and actually add in the Charlottesville that you were mentioning just as we started speaking,
right.
What went on at the university there last night, and the same people responsible for that horrible violence in Charlottesville were just in your city, and we wanted to include a picture of those guys with their tiki torches. And one of the things I don't know, if you were able to try this out, but in the book. There are actually there's a smartphone app called the Good Fight Viewer that you can download from the Apple or the Google Play Store, and you can point your phone at 60 different photographs in the book, and it launches a YouTube talk or a TED talk or a video or a documentary. So there's like 3.5 hours of little video clips that are triggered by the photographs, and it sort of again gives you a much deeper look in each of these stories. So you get to hear other people's voices and other opinions as you learn about these struggles and sort of the history of it. So often when you watch the news or read the news in the morning, or listen to the news, it's sort of like that happened today, but how did we get into Syria? How many people were lynched back in the days of when lynching was like a public festival where people would show up and pose in front of the bodies hanging from trees like they were going to a country fair. I was unaware of so much of this history until we started working on The Good Fight. Yeah.
And I've always admired Billie Holiday, and you have her featured in your book. And you had written in there that she had always ended each of her shows with this one particular song. You had the lyric in there, and then you did have the picture hanging across from her picture, and then she never came back for an encore. She was, I think, kind of overlooked as a mover in this kind of realm.
What's extraordinary to think of a song, which, by the way, this is something, I knew the song Strange Fruit, and I knew the Time magazine described it or nominated it or called it the song of the century. I didn't realize it was written by a Jewish guy that lived in the Bronx. Mm-hmm. And I also didn't realize that nobody sang about hangings on the radio. This is before the 60s, before the Civil Rights era. And no one wanted to release the song. And then when it was released, it became the #1 song in America. It sold 1 million copies, which at the time was extraordinary. And as you said, it became her sort of trademark song that she would end every one of her, and people would stay to the very end because they wanted her to hear that song. And that app I mentioned to you a minute ago, the Good Fight Viewer, when you point your phone at that photograph, you get to see Billie Holiday singing that song way
that
back.
Is amazing.
I guess,
I'm kind of a
you got to try it. It's really fun.
I just recently graduated to the 21st century.
Me too.
I got my first smartphone. I'm not kidding. I really did.
No, it's only
so
like
I can't wait to try it. But speaking of songs, this probably has nothing to do with the book. But yesterday in Gainesville at the University of Florida, there's a bell tower there, and I guess you can play whatever you want to play. I guess there's a keyboard or something. So there was a lady. She's a music professor at the school, and it's 11 flights of stairs. She went upstairs and she played on that thing that plays the bells, the song "Lift Every Voice and Sing." Did you see this story?
Oh no, but it's so perfect, right? That's the right way to respond to Richard Spencer and these nutcases, right? Don't give them. I hate that the media gives these people attention because they're this little fringe minority, and the more outrageous they are, the more the media, sort of jumps on them and gives them this bullhorn, which is so crazy.
Wow.
Like these are to me, these are the sick people in our society, and yet somebody's handing them a microphone.
We were talking earlier about how he didn't do his market research. If he did his research on this area, I don't know what he thinks of this area. Maybe he thought, oh, this is the South. They'll embrace me. Well, not this part of it. Anyway, I don't know what the rest of the South is like. But the kids at the university, come on. If you knew that university, you would know they're not going to put up with that. So, well,
the other thing I heard is that he spent $10,000 to rent that hall,
right?
And apparently the city had to spend $500,000 on security.
The state spent it.
That's crazy. That's the state. But what a waste of money for everybody. What could you do with $500,000 right now to feed people, to help in Puerto Rico, to build, to improve your city there? Utter waste of everyone's time and energy, right?
Okay, but the uncomfortable truth, I guess, is that we have to allow freedom of speech. That's the part. That's the part that you don't. Yeah. We don't want to not have that. So, the book is such a well done book. How long did this take to do? It's amazing, really, that you do have the Charlottesville chapter in here. That's amazing.
Yeah, no, everybody keeps saying, how did you do that? Because, usually books are done a year in advance.
Yeah.
We kept delaying and delaying and delaying just because we wanted it to feel like people would get to that page and say, oh my God, this is like so current. And, one of the things that I was so impressed with is right after Charlottesville, Apple Computer gave $1 million to the Anti-Defamation League. Of all the organizations that are out there right now, there's the Southern Poverty Law Center, there's the ACLU, but that Apple Computer decided the Anti-Defamation League were the ones that could do the most with that kind of funding. And then J.P. Morgan Chase gave them $1 million, and even Rupert Murdoch's son, James Murdoch, gave them $1 million to help fight against the kind of hatred and bigotry and just the vile messages that are being spewed by these this alt-right, these nutcases.
And I think your book is really going to help people move forward because you still have the Al Sharptons and Jesse Jacksons of the world that like to continue to live the way it was 50 years ago, and that's not the way it is now.
No, it's not. And the whole point of this book is we had a neoconservative writer for the New York Times, Bret Stephens, write the foreword to the book. This is not just one voice. We wanted to have lots of different voices in here, and I think over Thanksgiving and over the coming holidays, I think that racism and hatred and prejudice and injustice are going to be the topics at a lot of dinner table conversations. And my hope is that The Good Fight would be a really interesting way to spark informed, thoughtful conversations amongst families. That was my hope.
And I think your hope is being fulfilled. I think the news media does not reflect the world I see. I'm not saying none of it is out there. Obviously, they have to have their cameras focused on something. But for the most part, I don't see it. I'm telling you the truth. It's not the way the news makes it seem. It just seems like they kind of are focusing on a microcosm of everything. So, there's
that phrase, if it bleeds, it leads. If it's shocking or aberrant or if it's something that... Look, the reason we pay attention to murders and these horrible things that you see in the news is because it's not typical. It's not normal life. It's not, hopefully, something that most of us experience. And so, we gravitate to that, or the news media gravitates to that. It's a lot harder to do a story about everyday life than it is to do a story about something sick or twisted.
Rick, I have a question for you. I've always wondered, you call it the good fight, so what have been the weapons, the most effective weapons in the good fight? And I'm going to tell you some that I think, and I'm just curious if you agree, if there are any I'm leaving out. I think music has been a weapon. I think sports has been a weapon in a way, because the sports owners, the ones who want to make money, they have no choice but to hire the best athletes. Mm-hmm. And that means they have to break that race barrier sometimes, or all the time, a lot. I think the movie industry has been a great weapon in mm-hmm. some of this stuff. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Obviously, books and newspapers have. Anything I left out?
Well, no. I mean, I think your point is really well taken. If you look back, early media basically reinforced the stereotype. So they portrayed the Irish as monkeys, or blacks as less than human, or subservient, right? Or Indians as quaint or colloquial. And then slowly you started seeing with television, Archie Bunker, where this guy who played a racist, right, and a homophobic and an anti-Semite was on TV, and then people were arguing and fighting with him, and they used humor to explore topics. What Norman Lear did with so many of the TV shows in the 60s and 70s, and then now with movies where you can identify with a person that's in your living room or on the TV screen, and you think, oh my God, they're having their heart broken too. They're just like me. They're worried about their children. They're worried about their family's future. It's so easy for politicians to try to portray, the sinister other, right? Because that makes everybody look out in the other direction and doesn't pay attention to what the politicians are doing. One of my frustrations, and I think one of the things that I found really extraordinary when we were working on the good fight, is that last year, 800 women said they were going to run for office, and this year, 11,000 women have announced they're running for office.
Really?
So
wow.
I think a lot of there's this expression right now which is sort of migrated into the mainstream called woke, W-O-K-E, like I woke up. Uh-huh. And I think a lot of people look. I think all of us agree that Washington is broken, whether it's the right wing or the left wing. I don't think a lot of us feel like our congressmen and senators are doing the job that we hired them, that we elected them to do. So I think that in some ways what's been happening with Trump and in Washington is, I think people are realizing, we can't wait for some Superman or Superwoman to fly in and solve our problems, that we as individuals need to find a way to step up, whether it's inviting a refugee to dinner, or sponsoring somebody, or marching, or writing a book like The Good Fight, or running for office. I think there's a sense of the sense of complacency that so many of us have had, perhaps for the last 20 or 30 years. I think people are realizing I can't just keep hoping somebody else is going to solve these problems.
I think the mind behind the eye of your photography skills shows up in your photography. I don't think you're a celebrated photographer just because you're good with putting pictures together. I think what you just said tells us everything as to why you are the celebrated photographer you are, Rick. I loved what you just said, and I love what the book is saying. The book is just awesome. It's just a big, fun.
It's fabulous.
Fun to look through book, but at the same time, it is definitely going to stimulate your thought and your conversation.
And it's heart-wrenching, too.
You want to hear one of the things I'm the most excited about, which is that Amazon has decided to price the book. This ought to be a $100 book, and Amazon is pricing it right now $25.
I know.
Including delivery, which I love, because the more affordable the book is, the more people that will have it and will share it with their friends and family. So most authors want their books to cost as much as possible. If I could give these copies away, I would, and as a matter of fact, the Anti-Defamation League is going to be giving copies of the book to every member of Congress and the Senate, to governors, to heads of media companies, to Fortune 500 CEOs. We're trying to start a national conversation about the good fight and about America's history and what we need to do collectively as a nation to get this all right back on course again.
I am going to be the first person to leave a review on this on Amazon. I just realized nobody. Oh my gosh, how is it possible that nobody's done this yet?
Well, it came out. Yeah, it came out yesterday. So it's just the book is just available literally in the last 24 hours. So I would be honored.
Well,
Larry, I'd be so honored if you would.
I'm sorry that I left the most shortest what do you call this thing, review, if possible. I wrote absolutely amazingly profound. I hope that's good enough. I gave it 5 stars. Let me hit the submit button.
Fantastic.
All right, on the first one. The book is
multitasking.
It should definitely be $100 book. It's $25 on Amazon. The Good Fight is what it's called. There's a couple of books with that same title. Look for the one with the American flag on it. Thank you for being on the air with us, Rick Smolan. Great interview, and what an honor to have you.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks, Robin.
You're welcome. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.
Time for Farm and Ranch headlines on the Southeast AgNet. I'm Tyron Spearman reporting. Peanut farmers are trying to wrap up the bumper crop they've made this year and get it into the warehouse. Georgia's showing now that they have 70% of their peanuts dug and 54% harvested. Their 5-year average, 62 and 45. Alabama now has a total of 74% of their peanuts dug and harvested at 61. In Florida, 83% of their peanuts have been dug and 73% harvested. The Federal State Inspection Service reported that they have received in Florida 185,000 tons. In Georgia, they've received 920,000, approaching 1 million tons now, and Alabama at 132,000 tons. Nationwide, we've harvested 1,551,270 tons of peanuts. According to USDA's Ag Statistics Service, that's 41% so far that has been counted in the Federal State Inspection Service and Crop Update. New contracts have also appeared at the peanut buying points. They started off with about $475 to $500. Then they slowed down, and the big crop was predicted, and they dropped to the loan level of $355 per ton. This past week, some farmers are receiving an extra $20 to get them to $375 to prevent them from placing them in the loan. It's either take that extra now or try to wait for later. But peanut harvest is underway. They're trying to finish it up.
USDA service centers in Florida are holding disaster assistance and hurricane recovery workshops in 48 counties for farmers and ranchers impacted by Hurricane Irma. To find meeting dates and locations in your area, go to fsa.usda.gov/state-offices/Florida. Workshop topics include financial assistance programs, deadlines for applying, and more. Again, to find meeting dates and locations in your area, go to FSA.